Story recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a psychological thriller film called Triangle. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A tearful mother, Jess, hugs her son, Tommy, to comfort him from a nightmare. She tells him that she imagines being with him to save her from nightmares. In a sunny neighborhood, Jess prepares to leave on a sailing trip with her son. She cleans up paint that he spilled on the floor but gets her dress dirty. Someone rings the door, but she sees no one outside. With new clothes on, she prepares to leave the house. Stuck to her fridge is a note reminding her to head to the harbor. Jess tries to calm her son down, who's throwing a tantrum about a mess. Jess picks him up and takes him to the car. Waiting at the yacht is Jess's friend, Greg, along with the married couple, Sally and Downey. Sally introduces her friend Heather, whom Greg wasn't expecting. Greg spots Jess and Victor arrive. Tommy is not with her. Seeing Jess' troubled face, he checks in on her. She explains that she's simply tired, not wanting to ruin the trip for everyone else. Greg introduces Jess to everyone and gets the boat ready to sail. As the boat sails, Jess sleeps in the cabin, dreaming of the beach. She wakes up startled, but she doesn't remember her dream. While navigating the boat, Victor explains to Greg that he thought Jess was bringing her son along, so he asked where Tommy was. Jess couldn't answer him at first but finally says that Tommy is at school. But it's a Saturday, so there shouldn't be any school open. Greg informs Victor that Tommy goes to a special needs school, which is open every day. Heather and Jess come up from the cabin. A seagull flies over the boat, making Greg believe that it thinks they're a fishing boat and is hoping to get food from them. Greg encourages Jess to steer the yacht to uplift her mood. Heather and Sally gossip about the two. Heather learned that Jess is a waitress and has an autistic son. Sally thinks that Jess might be using Greg. Sally wanted to set Heather up with Greg. Greg explains to Jess that Victor has been living with him after running away from a troubled home. Downey and Sally are his friends from school, who always try to set him up with someone. Jess wonders if they think he's lonely. Greg insists that he's not but reveals that he intentionally visited Jess at the diner the day before to invite her to sail. Jess wonders how Greg feels about her. Jess shares her guilt about leaving Tommy behind, but Greg notes that feeling guilty over having time for herself makes her a good mother. Suddenly, the wind stops, leaving the boat immobile. Downey points to a dark cloud hovering close by. The group watches the cloud, unsure of what to do. Greg radios the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard reports that nothing odd is showing up on their end despite the yacht's condition. The radio goes static, then picks up the frequency of a frightened woman's call for help. Greg tries to communicate with the woman but the transmission disconnects. The storm reaches them, and hell breaks loose. Victor and Greg attempt to get the boat to safety while the guests hide in the cabin. Greg grabs Jess, keeping her close as he steers. Downey holds on to the other women but loses his grip on Heather when another wave hits the boat. The boat capsizes just before the storm calms. Greg and Victor help the others up the overturned boat. But they can't find Heather. The clouds clear up, but still no sign of Heather. Downey comforts his tearful wife, who's worried about her friend. Greg assures Jess that Tommy will be looked after until they return. A large passenger ship looms over from the distance. The group is hopeful, calling the ship for help. But Jess watches it with suspicion. Finally, the ship reaches them and they climb aboard. On the ship, Jess finds something eerily familiar about it. Victor calls for anyone on board, but no one answers. Greg suggests heading to the bridge and talking to the captain. Sally hopes that Heather made it on board the ship as well. The group goes in the promenade deck, still seeing no signs of life. The maze-like hallways confuse the group, with Downey thinking they're walking in circles. Jess shares with Greg that she feels like she knows this place. The others find photos of the ship, seeing that it's been around since 1932. They learn that the ship is named after the Greek god of wind, Aeolus, whose son, Sisyphus, is punished for cheating death by spending eternity pushing a boulder up a hill repeatedly. Greg and Victor investigate a sound coming from the end of the hallway. Victor picks up a set of keys from the floor. Jess recognizes that it's her keys, proving so by showing a photo of her son amongst the keychain, matching the one in her locket. Sally believes it was Heather who got the keys from the yacht and dropped them here. At the ship's dining room, they see fresh food laid out but still without anyone else in sight. Sally continues to call for Heather while Victor enjoys the food. Greg finally gets tired of Sally's yelling and stops her. Jess slowly turns around, feeling that someone's watching them. She sees a glimpse of someone running out of view and points it out to the others. Victor runs ahead to give chase. Back at the lounge, Sally wonders if Jess saw Heather. Greg decides to go to the bridge by himself, telling them to wait for Victor. Jess follows Greg, leaving the couple behind. Jess worries about Victor, But Greg is tired of how everyone is acting, arguing to Jess that she's just in shock. They stop as they hear noise from down the hall. Greg finds the cabin door where the noise is coming from. Inside the cabin's bathroom, there's a message on the mirror, saying "Go to theater," written in red. Meanwhile, Victor continues to hunt down the person Jess saw earlier. He hears loud sounds from afar and follows outside. Back to Jess and Greg, they find a map of the ship. Jess brings up that the writing was written in blood. Greg thinks it's just a joke, played by board crew members. Jess is unconvinced, deciding to leave and go back to the dining area. Greg argues that her paranoia has her fabricating her own little world in her mind. Jess reminds him that her world is her son, making him feel guilty. Sally and Downey follow a trail of blood out the deck. Downey insists that they meet with the others in the theater, but Sally points out that the blood is heading there anyway. They go to the theater, with Sally looking around for more signs of blood. Sally thought the blood was Heather's, but Downey doubts Heather is even on the ship. Jess reaches the dining room, but it's empty. The previously fresh food on the table is now rotting. She hears a movement and hides. An injured Victor enters and Jess goes to his aid but is met with his hands around her neck. He tackles her to the floor. Out of desperation, Jess finds a wound at the back of his head and pushes it. This causes Victor to collapse and release her. Worried, Jess checks on him, but a gunshot diverts her attention. Jess heads to the theater to investigate, finding Sally and Downey cradling a bloodied Greg. As soon as Sally sees her, Sally accuses her of firing at Greg. But Jess was with Victor, who was also hurt. Downey thinks that Jess also harmed Victor. He tells her that Jess was the one who told them to go to the theater, but she insists that she didn't. Sally gets hit in the chest by a bullet, and Downey is hit on the back. Jess sees the burlap masked shooter on the theater's upper deck, who continues to shoot at the couple. Downey dies just as Jess sees the shooter retreat. She tries to take Sally to safety, but the shooter fires at Sally again, mortally wounding her. Jess runs for her life, reaching the engine room to hide. When the coast is clear, she runs to the kitchen and grabs a knife for protection. Jess hides behind a kitchen island when she hears the shooter closing in. The shooter peers into the kitchen but doesn't see her and goes away. Thinking it's safe, Jess heads out of the kitchen and sees a sign to the boat deck. Quickly, she goes out to the deck but is hit on the head with the back of the gun. The shooter comes forward as she begs for her life. When the shooter pulls the trigger, she diverts the weapon away, missing her. She fights back and slips out of the deck, landing on the lower floor. Jess runs with the shooter on her trail. The gun jams, opting for the shooter to throw it at her as she climbs over the rails to the front of the ship. Jess stumbles down but gets back on her feet quickly. Running to the back of the ship, she spots an axe. To mislead the shooter, she throws a broken valve across the deck but runs back to the front. She stops, sensing danger. Jess swings the axe at her pursuer, who attempts to hit her with a crowbar. Jess gets the upper hand, evading the crowbar and shoving her opponent. Jess corners her opponent, who is stammering as she backed away from her. Jess interrogates her, realizing it's a woman. She repeatedly tells Jess that the only way out is to kill them. Jess swings the axe at the woman, causing her to fall. Jess watches the woman disappear into the water. Relieved that it's over, Jess catches her breath. She hears music from inside the nearby cabin and finds a gramophone. Jess inspects her injuries when she hears yelling from outside. On the ocean, she sees Greg's overturned yacht, with Greg, Sally, Victor, Downey, and herself alive and calling the ship. Confused, Jess backs away, bumping onto the gramophone, which starts playing again. She hears the others, now climbing on board the ship. She follows them into the promenade deck, hiding behind the walls as the others look around. Jess overhears the same conversations as earlier. While the others are talking about Sisyphus, Jess peeks and sees her other self look back, nearly spotting her. At her wit's end, Jess sinks into the floor when her keys drop from her pocket. Realizing the others heard her, Jess runs away. She finds an empty corridor and hides. Jess continues to wander, hearing Sally yell for Heather at the dining room. The new Jess looks back and spots her from the mirror, just before she runs off. The original Jess runs back to the deck and sees Downey's body in the water, feasted upon by seagulls. Jess hears Victor coming, and she gets an idea. When Victor sees her, Jess explains what happened to her, telling him the one there with is a copy of her. She tries to show him the dead body in the water, but it's no longer there. Jess desperately tries to convince Victor, but he doesn't believe her. He tries to go away, but she pushes him while rambling on, accidentally slamming his head against a hook on the wall. Victor pulls away, bearing a wound at the back of his head. Horrified, Jess runs away, narrowly avoiding the new Jess and Greg. Greg's previous argument that things were all in her mind runs through her head, driving Jess into confusion. She ends up in the crew's locker room where she finds papers scattered all around. seeing that they all say the same thing in her own handwriting, to kill them all if they board the ship. She opens the lockers for more clues until she finds a row of overalls, similar to what the previous shooter was wearing. The previous shooter's ramblings play in her mind, clearer than before. Jess finds a row of shotguns as the voice repeatedly tells her to get rid of the others to escape. She takes one of the guns, facing the mirror, confused about what to do. Finally, she breaks down in hopelessness. Something catches her eye from the grated floor, and she picks up another locket, the same one she is wearing. Dozens of the same locket are under the floor, with the one around her neck snagging between the cracks and falling into the pile. Jess has been in this exact same scenario multiple times. Remembering her son, Jess finds the urge to escape. She grabs a burlap sack and gathers shotgun rounds. The new group continues their journey, with Sally, Downey, and Greg heading to the theater and the injured Victor wandering around. Jess comes across the new Victor, who is alarmed to see the shotgun in her hand. Jess tells him that she didn't mean to hurt him and wants to get them out of the ship. The new Jess walks into the lounge, looking for Sally. Jess hides while Victor meets up with the new Jess. Breaking the pattern, the original Jess reveals herself to the other her, confusing both the new Victor and new Jess. She aims her gun at the new Jess, repeating that she's not really her. Jess musters up the courage to shoot her own self but can't, letting the new Jess escape. Jess turns to Victor, promising him that they will all escape together. A gunshot distracts Jess. She goes to the theater, knowing what will happen. She pushes Sally and Downey out of the way when the shooter fires at them. She helps the couple escape the theater, explaining that they can escape if they change the pattern. Downey demands a better explanation, but Jess insists on hurrying. She gives him the shotgun, telling them to wait while Jess retrieves Victor. Jess comes back to the dining area, but Victor is gone. She follows a trail of blood and sees it stop at the edge of the deck. Victor had fallen into the water. Downey fires the gun at someone in the distance. It's the shooter with the burlap sack. She takes the mask off, revealing that she's another Jess with blood on her face. The shooter Jess tells the couple that Victor fell to the side of the boat. Downey asks if she pushed him. She says they can't prove if she did, but they need to follow her to survive. The original Jess gets back inside, calling out to Downey. Out in the deck with Downey and Sally, the shooter Jess insists on ignoring the other one's calls. Shooter Jess gets the couple inside a bedroom, where she stabs them. Sally escapes, and the original Jess chases after her. Sally doesn't stop, thinking that it was her who stabbed them. Sally hides in the engine room, avoiding the original Jess. She finds a control room and sends out a distress call, begging for help. As Sally leaves the room, Greg's voice is heard from the speakers. Sally's call was the one Greg and Jess heard before the storm hit. She tries to communicate with him, but the line disconnects. Jess continues her search for Sally, who's crying on the upper deck at the front of the boat. Sally has crawled into where the rest of her old selves were disposed of, horrified at the sight. Jess carefully walks to her, but Sally is scared. Jess reassures her that she's not the same Jess that hurt her and Downey. The ruckus at the bottom deck alerts Jess. She sees the new Jess fighting the shooter Jess before throwing the shooter off the ship. Jess goes back to Sally, telling her to hold on as the yacht will come back to repeat the loop. She promises that they can escape once it does, but Sally succumbs to her wounds and dies. When Sally dies, Jess hears the new group calling for help. Realizing that the time repeats after everyone dies, she starts to formulate an idea. Jess runs down the deck, seeing the overturned yacht getting far. She climbs down the engine room and tries to stop the ship from getting too far from the yacht, but to no avail. Jess goes back to the deck and hears the second Jess recount what happened to the newest Victor. The second Jess runs away after accidentally wounding Victor, allowing the original one to tell him that she can save him. She goes to the bedroom where Downey was stabbed by the previous shooter, seeing that he lived long enough to write her name with his blood on the mirror. She changes the message, writing "Go to theater" in the mirror. Jess pushes Downey's and Greg's bodies off the ship. In the dining area, Jess tells the newest versions of Sally and Downey to go to the theater. Now that she has set up everything from the first loop in motion, Jess disguises herself as the new shooter, hiding her face in a burlap sack. Jess follows the newest Greg to the theater's balcony. He turns around to see her aiming the gun at him. Greg attempts to negotiate with her, saying that he and the rest will just leave. But Greg recognizes Jess's sandals, realizing who she is. Jess reveals her plan to fulfill the conditions of the first loop to start another one, but this time, she will wait for them and prevent them from getting on the ship. Greg promises they'll do whatever she wants, but Jess simply apologizes and fires the gun on him. Greg drops to the seats below, alarming Sally and Downey. Jess hides away, listening to the couple argue with the newest Jess, who just arrived. Jess starts firing again, fulfilling the tragedy from earlier. Jess chases after the newest version of herself down to the engine room. Jess reaches this third Jess at the deck and hits her on the head. The third Jess begs for her life again, making her hesitate. As it happened in the first loop, her hesitation allows the third Jess to escape. Jess's shotgun jams, so she throws it at her new self. The third Jess grabs the axe and attempts to mislead her. The original Jess grabs the crowbar and the two fight. The third Jess evades her attacks, disarming and cornering her on the edge of the ship. The original Jess tells the other to kill the next group before they get on the ship. The new Jess swings her axe, causing the original Jess to fall in the water. The original Jess wakes up by the beach, the same one she saw in her dream at the yacht. Jess looks around, trying to make sense of what happened. Jess makes her way to her house, relieved that she has escaped. Carefully, she looks into the window, seeing her son painting. Her joy is halted when she hears her own voice. Hiding behind the bush, she sees another Jess gathering clothes and a toy ship from the backyard. She looks into the window again, seeing herself yell at her son for leaving the toy. Tommy sees her from the window and accidentally spills the paint on the floor. Jess cries, listening to herself slap and yell at Tommy for making a mess. While the Jess at home cleans up the paint, the original Jess rings the doorbell to distract her. Jess walks around the backyard and grabs a hammer from the shed before going into the house. Without hesitation, Jess slams the hammer on the new Jess's head. She turns to find that Tommy has seen the event. She embraces her son and convinces him that what he saw is just a bad dream. Jess puts the body in the trunk of the car, taking the locket she lost, and drives away with Tommy. Jess promises her son that she will no longer yell at or hit him. She stops when blood splatters on the windshield. Jess checks and sees a dead seagull on the street. She picks up the seagull to throw it away, but she sees more dead seagulls on the shore below. Confused, she rushes back to the car and drives away. Tommy cries at the backseat, scared of the blood on the windshield. His cries distract Jess, causing her to hit the side of a truck. The car flips and crashes. Passerbys find Jess's body that was previously hidden in the trunk, and Tommy, dying from his injuries. The original Jess stares blankly at the tragedy. A taxi driver walks up to her. He points out that nothing can be done to bring the boy in the accident back. This gives Jess an idea. She tells the driver to take her to the harbor. Jess meets up with Victor. With her memory fading, Jess forgets who he is, so Victor introduces himself and walks her to the yacht. When he asks about Tommy, she tells him that he's at school. Greg meets them by the yacht, and Jess hugs him, apologizing. When Greg tells her she doesn't have to come, Jess insists that she wants to go sailing, hoping to start another loop where she can be reunited with her son. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.